We're back with our legal eagles, Gerard Filitti and Ron Coleman. And as Congress returns to Capitol Hill this week, the SAVE Act has been one of the most important pieces of legislation that Republicans are championing. And this coming from Axios earlier this week. The House is set to vote on the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, or SAVE Act, which would require documentary proof of United States citizenship to vote in federal elections. That would include a passport, a photo ID card that proves a voter was born in the U.S., or another form of photo ID, along with supporting documentation such as a birth certificate, the bill says. The legislation would require non-citizens to be removed from voter registration rolls, require election officials to ask voter registration applicants for proof of citizenship, and open them up to legal consequences if they do not. So, Gerard, this seems very basic. I mean, it's already federal law, but this is just requiring that, we go a little bit more above and beyond and require the states to actually administer their elections in a way that doesn't allow for illegals to vote or non-citizens to vote in elections. This shouldn't be controversial, and yet the Democrats are screaming, oh, disenfranchisement, oh no. Well, I'm personally okay if we disenfranchise someone who was never franchised to begin with. So what's the problem here?
Well, it's not disenfranchisement, it's the ease of getting people to register to vote and vote. And the issue ultimately is that there is a lack of trust in who these people are, whether everyone who is registered to vote is entitled to vote, whether they're not citizens or whether they're felons in a state that doesn't allow for felon voting. This is a major problem. And the problem here is, if I want to get on a plane today, I need to show a passport, which has my nationality and citizenship, or I need a real ID. Well, increasingly, I need a real ID, which to get a driver's license with a real ID, I need to provide documentation about my citizenship and my eligibility to be in the country. So I need more proof that I am a U.S. citizen to be able to get on a plane than I do to get into a ballot and vote. And that's a problem. That's a security lapse that should be simple to remedy. But the Democrats are obstructing this for a simple reason that they're claiming it's inconvenient. Well, inconvenient for whom exactly? Because everyone has access to these documents. Everyone has access to be able to show that you're a citizen. Everyone has free access to these documents. So the Democrats' argument is not really availing. This is more subterfuge to say what? To basically make it harder for registered voters to be able to vote and have their votes counted, because quite frankly, we don't know who these people who are coming into the ballot box really are.
Yeah, so Ron, I mean, clearly this is just, the Democrat messaging that is hiding their ultimate motive. And I think that is that they want to have people who are not eligible actually voting in elections because they tend to favor Democrats. Do you think that that's accurate?
Of course. Of course it's accurate. And to some extent, it is the fault of the federal judiciary. The Supreme Court has repeatedly refused to take up cases at the circuit level that have upheld court orders at the district court level, overturning voter ID laws. The Supreme Court could have ruled on that loud and clear over decades and has refused to do so. So now the cultural norm, not only in the judiciary, but throughout the elite decision-making sectors of our society, are that there's something inherently wrong or racist, which is in and of itself a racist concept. The idea that you have to be white to figure out how to get a driver's license. This nonsense. Of course, that's exactly what it is, and it's shameful.
So, Gerard, where does this go in terms of election integrity? And, if the SAFE Act does not prevail in Congress, then, we've seen that election integrity has been an issue, well before the 2020 election. I think it just kind of came to the fore because of Donald Trump's campaign and those election challenges in 2020. But this has been an ongoing issue. And it seems like, again, like we were talking about earlier in the program with abortion, it seems like the conservatives just don't have kind of a cohesive strategy to really make progress when the Democrats somehow are just so much better on messaging.
In two ways, you need this effort on a state-by-state basis. You need states to pass legislation within the states, but then you also need Congress to step in, as with the SAVE Act. But ultimately, I think Ron gave you the answer, which is the judiciary needs to get involved. You have these cases. You've had good laws that were passed. You've had courts that have stepped in to block them. But there's the willingness of the appellates, of the circuit courts and the Supreme Court to step in and weigh in on them that has kept these laws for over a decade and a half now from making meaningful change. So really, the pressure here needs to be be on the judiciary, not so much the legislature, because the laws are there. The will is there to pass the laws, but they're being stuck in the courts. So until those move along, we won't really have a resolution to this, and our elections won't be as safeguarded as they can and should be.
Well, and staying with you, Gerard, what about the issue of legislative delegation to the executive? I mean, because one of the things that I learned in the aftermath of 2020 was how much of the administration of elections has really been delegated by the legislature, and they don't have a whole lot of genuine oversight. And so a lot of these, just arbitrary rules that the executive branch and all the way through election administration officials can just promulgate, that the courts have decided, okay, that's fair enough because that's the entity. Shouldn't the legislature reclaim some of their authority over those kind of decision making?
Oh, absolutely. And as we've seen in Supreme Court decisions this year, that's the direction the courts are moving in as well. It's not just with elections that the legislature has been delegating to the executive. It's with everything. That's why we have these regulatory agencies that have run amok, and the Supreme Court has been steadily cutting back on them, including overturning the Chevron doctrine to give deference to agency interpretations. So we are seeing the courts weigh in on this and telling the legislature that it needs to be more explicit. And I think you will see this carry over into voting laws as well, because now you can't just have it delegated to a Secretary of State. You need more explicit content. And I think you will see that. And you will, when the next wave of challenges comes to laws that are passed, the courts will consider things differently based on the Supreme Court cases that came out this year.
And so, Ron, yeah, and that's a really interesting observation, and particularly with the Chevron deference being overturned, which was a great opinion. Ron, do you see that there has been that kind of shift in the judiciary as a whole, or is it really just with the Supreme Court majority?
Well, the courts are going to have to follow the Supreme Court. There has been that sort of movement in what I'll call the interior circuit courts. Obviously, the Second and Ninth Circuits remain blissfully uninterested in any change from liberalism of a generation. I do think that you were talking, Jenna, about messaging. The entire purpose of proposing this legislation was messaging. Everyone knows that is not going to pass. There's no way the Senate will even consider this bill. But by making the White House come out and not only fail to support, but actually affirmatively trash a bill that merely says, make sure that the people who vote are entitled to vote, that's actually a form of very powerful messaging. And I actually applaud the GOP for putting it out there.
Yeah, and Representative Chip Roy is doing an excellent job, and so Ron, as well with this type of messaging. I mean, the Democrats have come out, and their key line for November is, we need to save democracy. And Sotomayor even made what I consider a political statement in the Trump immunity decision. With fear for democracy, I know I dissented. It was just utterly ridiculous. So can the GOP ahead of November actually utilize this moment to say, listen, Democrats, this is you that want to tear down all of the safeguards in our system. We're the ones that actually want our constitutional republic to persist with our supreme law of the land.
They can, and to some extent they will, and they won't as much as we want them to. But it is always easy to second guess an armchair quarterback. And as we were saying at in another segment, it's the same thing with abortion. You have to really look at that politician's palette of choices, the leverage he does or she does not have or does have. It's very easy for us on social media to decide what absolute position should be. Much harder to get elected and stay in office and get things done.
Yeah, well, I wish that a lot of the elected officials would take your advice from social media than they do the consultant class. But, that's just me. I always appreciate your snark. But closing thoughts on election integrity, Gerard. I mean, do you think that we're better off at least now than we were from 2020? We only have about 30 seconds left.
I don't think we are. We have everything from artificial intelligence to hackers to sophisticated schemes to get people to vote. We have people who just simply show up with buses to nursing homes to get them out to the ballot, which may or may not, those people may be like Joe Biden. They may not know who they're voting for or what they're voting for. So there's a lot to be said for election integrity. And if you can fix it in the small areas, like actually proving that people are citizens and entitled to vote, you should do it. And this is a big issue for this election, but it's going to be a crucial issue to come.
Yeah, a lot more work to be done. Legal Eagles, thanks so much. We'll be right back.